Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. We are on chapter 16, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins Meet Bruno. This starts on page 147, so if you have a copy, join me in that page. If not, that's fine. It's always okay to just listen. So let's just get right into it. This is The Witches by Roald Dahl, illustrations by Quentin Blake. Thank you so much for coming here and joining me. Please subscribe and hit that thumbs up. If not, that's okay. Thanks for being here. That's what counts. So, let's enjoy this together. Chapter 16, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins Meet Bruno. Page 147. My grandmother carried me back into her own bedroom and put me on the table. She set the precious bottle down beside me. "What time are those witches having supper in the dining room?" she asked. 8 o'clock, I said. She looked at her watch. "It is now 6:10, she said. "We've got until 8 o'clock to work out our next move." Suddenly her eye fell on upon Bruno. He was still in the banana bowl on the table. He had eaten 3 bananas and was now attacking a 4th. He had become immensely fat. 3 bananas and going on 4 for a mouse? That's crazy. "That's quite enough," my grandmother said, lifting him out of the bowl and putting him on the tabletop. "I think it's time we return this little fellow to the bosom of his family. Don't you agree, Bruno?" Bruno scowled at her. I've never seen a mouse scowl before, but he managed it. "My parents let me eat as much as I want," he said. "I'd rather be with them than with you." "Of course you would," my grandmother said. "Do you know where your parents might be at this moment?" "They were in the lounge not long ago." "Oh, they were in the lounge not long ago," I said. "I saw them sitting there as we dashed through on our way up." "Up here." "Right," my grandma said. "Let's go and see if they are still there. Do you want to come along?" she added, looking at me. "Yes, please," I said. "I shall put you both in my handbag," she said. "Keep quiet and stay out of sight. If you must peep out now and again, don't show more than your nose." Her handbag was a large, bulgy black leather affair with a tortoise-shell clasp. She picked up Bruno and me and popped us into it. "I shall leave the clasp undone," she said, "but be sure to keep out of sight." I had no intention of keeping out of sight. I wanted to see everything. I seated myself in a little side pocket inside the bag near the clasp, and from there I was able to poke my head out whenever I wanted to. "Hey!" Bruno called at me. "Give me the rest of the banana I was eating." "All right," my grandmother said. "Anything to keep you quiet." She dropped the half-eaten banana into the bag, then slung the bag over her arm and marched out of the room and went thumping along the corridor with her walking stick. We went down in the lift to the ground floor and made our way through the reading room to the lounge. And there, sure enough, sat Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins in a couple of armchairs with a low round glass-covered table between them. I like that visual. There were several other groups in there as well, but the Jenkins were the only couple sitting alone. Mr. Jenkins was reading a newspaper. Mrs. Jenkins was knitting something large and mustard-colored. Only my nose and eyes were above the clasp of my grandmother's handbag, but I had a super view. I could see everything. My grandmother, dressed in black lace, went thumping across the floor of the lounge and halted in front of the Jenkins table. "Are you Mr. and Mr. Jenkins?" she asked. Mr. Jenkins looked at her over the top of his newspaper and frowned. "Yes," he said, "I am Mr. Jenkins. What can I do for you, madame?" "I am afraid I have some rather alarming news for you," she said. "It's about your son, Bruno." "What about Bruno?" Mr. Jenkins said. Mrs. Jenkins looked up, but went on knitting. What's the little blighter been up to now? Oh, what's the little... When you messed up the parent's voice. What's the little blighter been up to now? Mr. Jenkins said. Raiding the kitchen, I suppose. It's a bit worse than that, my grandmother said. Do you think we might go somewhere more private while I tell you about it? Private? Mr. Jenkins said. Why do we have to be private? This is not an easy thing for me to explain, my grandma said. I'd much rather we all went up to your room and sat down before I tell you more. Mr. Jenkins lowered his paper. Mrs. Jenkins stopped knitting. I don't want to go up to my room, madame, Mr. Jenkins said. I'm quite comfortable here, thank you very much. He was a large, coarse man, and he wasn't used to being pushed around by anybody. Kindly state your business, and then leave us alone, he added. He spoke as though he was addressing someone who was trying to sell him a vacuum cleaner at the back door. My poor grandmother, who had been doing her best to be as kind to them as possible, now began to bristle a bit herself. We really can't talk in here, she said. There are too many people. This is a rather delicate and personal matter. I'll talk where I'm dashed well want. I'll talk where I dashed well want to, madame, Mr. Jenkins said. Come on now, out with it. If Bruno has broken a window or smashed your spectacles, then I'll pay for the damage. But I am not budging out of this seat. One or two other groups in the room were beginning to stare at us now. Where is Bruno anyway, Mr. Jenkins? Where is Bruno anyway? Mr. Jenkins said. Tell him to come here and see me. He's already here. He's here already, my grandmother said. He's in my handbag. She patted the big floppy leather bag with her walking stick. What the heck do you mean he's in your handbag? Mr. Jenkins shouted. Are you trying to be funny? Mrs. Jenkins said, very prim. There's nothing funny about this, my grandmother said. Your son has suffered a rather unfortunate mishap. He's always suffering mishaps, Mr. Jenkins said. He suffers from overeating, and then he suffers from wind. You should hear him after supper. He sounds like a brass band, but a good dose of castor oil soon puts him right again. Where is the little beggar? I've already told you, my grandmother said. He's in my handbag, but I do think it might be better if we went somewhere private before you meet him in his present state. This woman's mad, Mrs. Jenkins said. Tell her to go away. The plain fact is, my grandmother said, that your son Bruno has been rather drastically altered. Altered? Shouted Mr. Jenkins. What the devil do you mean, altered? Go away, Mrs. Jenkins said. You're a silly old woman. I'm trying to tell you as gently as I possibly can that Bruno really is in my handbag, my grandmother said. My own grandson actually saw them doing it to him. Saw who doing what to him? For heaven's sake, shouted Mr. Jenkins. He had a black mustache which jumped up and down when he shouted. Saw the witches turn him into a mouse, my grandmother said. Who's the matter, dear? Mrs. Jenkins said to her husband. Have this mad woman thrown out of the hotel? At this point, my grandmother's patience came to an end. She fished around in her handbag and found Bruno. She lifted him out and dumped him on the glass-topped table. Mrs. Jenkins took one look at the fat little brown mouse who was still chewing a bit of banana, and she let out a shriek that rattled the crystals on the chandelier. She sprang out of her chair, yelling, "It's a mouse! Take it away! I can't stand the things!" "It's Bruno," my grandmother said. "You nasty, cheeky old woman!" shouted Mr. Jenkins. He started flapping his newspaper at Bruno, trying to sweep him off the table. My grandmother rushed forward and managed to grab hold of him. "How was there a caterpillar in our car?" Grab hold of him before he was swept away. Mrs. Jenkins was still screaming her head off, and Mr. Jenkins was towering over us and shouting, "Get out of here! How dare you frighten my wife like that? Take your filthy mouse away this instant!" "Help!" screamed Mrs. Jenkins. Her face had gone the color of the underside of a fish. "Well, I did my best," my grandmother said, and with that she turned and sailed out of the room, carrying Bruno with her. That is the end. It ended on page 153, so that means we'll be starting on chapter 17 on page 154, and it's called The Plan. See you guys next time. Thank you for joining me. Remember, guys, to subscribe, tell other people that you know about me, and like the video if you liked this chapter. Yeah, subscribe. Go check out my other videos, and I'm going to try to find this caterpillar that wormed away. I had like so little left that I was like, I'm finishing this before I worry about the caterpillar. So it's a pretty furry one. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching again. It's so awesome to have you guys here, and see you guys next time. Ciao for now. Bye.